This opportunity with the NGAA has been really great in providing an up-to-date evidence base using the latest census results to look at where the fast-growing outer suburbs have come from, where they are today, and that telling us where might they be in the future. Today around 1 in 5 Australians call the fast-growing outer suburbs home. And they've actually been growing by about 3% per annum over the last 5 years, which is substantially above the national average. But what's really interesting, I guess, is the nature of this growth and how that has changed. And so we've looked at the latest ABS census data to have a look at some of those stories about this transition or this changing diversity within the fast-growing outer suburbs. And one of the first things we see is, I guess, the age profile is not that, you're not just seeing first home buyers, but you're seeing the fast-growing outer suburbs provide opportunities for previous first home buyers to upgrade. So seeing examples of those more mature families. We're also seeing growth within retirees and empty nesters, and in fact the empty nesters were actually the third largest growing cohort or service age group in the fast growing outer suburbs in the last 5 years. The economic role and function of the fast growing outer suburbs has traditionally been about serving its population and its growing population, but also providing land and opportunities for both manufacturing and freight and logistics. But I guess looking at the census data and our evidence from National Land Economics, we've seen there's these early signals of a transition. The fast-growing outer suburbs are among the largest growing employment LGAs within Australia. I think 9 out of the top 25 growth areas for employment are fast-growing outer suburbs. And it's not just the growth, but it's also the nature of that growth as well that's changing. So if we have a look at, we're using ABS occupational definitions of what's high skilled. If we have a look at the occupation by industry profile within the fast-growing outer suburbs, we're seeing the knowledge intensity increasing across a number of industries, primarily being health, education and professional services. And I guess one example is the health industry within the fast-growing outer suburbs added around 45,000 jobs over the last 5 years. And the important thing there is around 40% of those were in high-skilled occupations. So it's not just providing population servicing roles here, but actually really increasing the skill profile of those jobs located within the fast-growing outer suburbs. And one of the other things we found through the National Growth Areas Congress was a number of examples of other local government areas where they're seeing their businesses really embed technology and knowledge into how they do their everyday business. So there's some great examples around the technology being used in freight logistics and manufacturing as well. So while they may be traditional industries, they're increasing their knowledge and technology content. So while there's been some great news stories around the growth within the fast-growing outer suburbs from an employment perspective, they're still facing really large job deficits. And this is a problem because in Australia, our larger capital cities at the moment are coming under considerable pressure from, I guess, growing pains from this growing population. So whether it be through congestion, through housing affordability, but also the spatial inequalities that have emerged as well within the cities themselves in terms of income and employment. And so within the fast-growing outer suburbs, their job deficit, and what I mean by a job deficit is the difference between how many jobs there are compared to how many employed residents there are. But the number, there was around 69 jobs for every 100 workers within the fast-growing outer suburbs in 2016, and this has been largely unchanged for the last decade. So while they've been growing a lot of jobs, they've also had significant population as well, and in some cases the job's not being able to keep up with that growth. If there isn't investment in infrastructure, what we see is that job deficit will increase and congestion will become worse than it is today. And so I think CEDA themselves have come out and suggested that congestion costs the economy around $13 billion today. That's expected to increase by about $53 billion by 2031. So if something isn't done here, we're going to see a city and probably a place that is an undesirable place. Some of the research that we've done with Western Sydney University also showed that the job deficit in Western Sydney is actually going to increase beyond 300,000 by 2031. And so you can see this sort of being an early signal, not just to Sydney, but also the other growth areas within the capital cities, that without that infrastructure and that investment, these areas are going to continue to face these large job deficits. I guess the problem there is that it then results in negatively impacting on Australia's productivity. We know that capital cities are the main driver of employment and economic growth with this shift to knowledge, but we also know through research that national economics that the level of infrastructure within a region is critical to driving economic growth. The fast-growing outer suburbs are facing also really large deficits in terms of infrastructure. From our research, we found that while the fast-growing outer suburbs are contributing around 35% of population growth within Australia, they're only receiving around 13% of infrastructure. So that's infrastructure includes things like hospitals, buildings, roads, telecommunications and utilities. And so you can see that this major shortfall in infrastructure really creates barriers to businesses and to residents as well in terms of how they access the services that a city provides. The fast-growing outer suburbs are seen in a way as a more affordable place to live because of affordable housing. But when you take into the other accounts of other cost of living, that they're actually not as well as you might think. So things like their dependency on cars, the journey to work profile, much more reliance on using cars to get to work, much lower reliance on public transport, actually eats into the household budget, and it makes the living in the fast-growing outer suburbs not as affordable as you might think.